Rebuilding yourself is often presented as a visible process, a montage of early mornings, dramatic breakthroughs, and obvious transformations. The kind of story where everyone can see the change as it's happening. Real rebuilding rarely looks like that. Most of the time, from the outside, it looks like nothing. You go to work. You make dinner. You answer messages. You take care of responsibilities. Days pass, weeks pass, sometimes months pass. There is no dramatic announcement, no clear milestone, no moment when the world stops and recognizes that something inside you is being reconstructed. And because it is so quiet, many people assume it is not working. They mistake invisibility for failure. But the hidden nature of rebuilding is not a flaw in the process. It is the process. The deepest changes happen before there is evidence, long before confidence returns, long before results arrive, long before anyone else notices. The Stoics understood this better than most, especially one man whose private notes reveal a lifetime spent rebuilding himself, despite having more power than almost anyone in history. By the end of this video, you will have Marcus Aurelius's actual daily system for rebuilding, the one he used privately for decades. Imagine you are 6 months removed from something ending. Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was a job, maybe it was a version of yourself that no longer exists. 6 months feels like enough time that things should look different by now. That is where the quiet shame begins. You are doing many of the right things. You show up. You keep moving. You learn. You recover. You make better decisions than you did before. And yet when you look around, there is very little visible proof. The gap between where you are and where you expected to be becomes its own source of friction. You notice it while scrolling. Someone announces a promotion. Someone posts engagement photos. Someone launches a project. Someone appears to have arrived somewhere while you still feel like you are carrying bricks to a construction site nobody can see. You notice it on Sunday evenings when the week is ending and there is no dramatic evidence that all your effort has changed anything. You notice it when you run into someone who seems further ahead, not necessarily happier, not necessarily wiser, just further along according to the metrics that are easy to display. And then the thoughts arrive. I thought I would be past this by now. I should be further ahead. Maybe I am rebuilding incorrectly. The difficult part is that these thoughts sound reasonable. They disguise themselves as evaluation, but beneath them is comparison. You compare your internal process to someone else's external results. You compare your current reality to an imaginary timeline that never existed. You compare unfinished construction to completed buildings. The result is a strange loneliness, not because nobody cares, because nobody can see what is happening. They can see outcomes. They cannot see restraint. They cannot see improved judgment. They cannot see the moments where you chose a better response than the one you would have chosen a year ago. And yet those invisible moments are often where rebuilding is actually occurring. Marcus Aurelius is often remembered as the Roman emperor. What is easier to forget is that the book that made him famous was never meant to be read by anyone else. Meditations was not a public speech. It was not a leadership manual. It was not written for an audience. It was a private notebook, a working document. A place where the most powerful man in the world repeatedly returned to correct his own thinking. That detail matters, because when people imagine wisdom, they often imagine certainty. Marcus Aurelius's writing shows the opposite. Page after page reveals someone constantly reminding himself of lessons he had not fully mastered. Someone continually rebuilding his perspective. Someone who needed the practice as much as anyone else. This is the same man who wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events, not as inspiration, as instruction, as a reminder," as something he needed to revisit repeatedly. One of the ideas running through his work is what later became known as amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive acceptance, not resignation, not pretending difficult events are pleasant. Something far more demanding, to treat reality itself as usable material, to stop negotiating with what happened and begin working with it. Marcus expressed this principle in one of his most famous lines. "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. In other words, the obstacle is not separate from the path. The obstacle becomes the path. And that changes everything about how rebuilding works. Consider someone rebuilding after losing a job. Without amor fati, they carry.